He thought she was just a cook, until the cowboy realized she was the love of his life. The star freighter Silver Comet hummed softly as it coasted toward the edge of the inhabited systems. Its hull reflected the faint glow of distant stars, and inside, the cabin smelled faintly of oil and metal. Jace Mallory, a seasoned pilot with a suntanned face and a cowboy's easy smile, leaned back in the cockpit. His boots rested on the worn console, and he watched the space station come into view, floating like a jewel in the black expanse. This was a small trading hub, a place where travelers, merchants, and explorers of all kinds crossed paths. It was noisy, bustling, and chaotic, but Jace liked it that way. He had been to dozens of stations, and while most were a blur of corridors and merchants shouting over each other, this one had a charm to it. Docking was smooth. Jace guided the Silver Comet into the assigned berth with ease, the soft vibrations of the ship settling against the station's metal arms. He stretched and grinned, thinking about two things: supplies and food. Space travel was lonely, and nothing was better than a warm meal after weeks of ration packs. The docking bay was crowded. Robots rolled past with crates, humanoid aliens bargained over goods in strange languages, and travelers moved from one section to another like bees in a hive. Jace stepped off the freighter, his boots echoing on the metallic floor, and headed toward the main concourse. The food court was tucked into a corner near the observation decks. The smells hit him immediately: spiced meats from one stall, baked bread from another, and something rich and sweet that made his stomach rumble. He wandered between the stalls, scanning the offerings, but one small eatery caught his eye. It was unassuming. A simple sign hung above the counter: Myra's Kitchen. The aroma was different here, comforting and homey, not loud or overpowering like the other stalls. Behind the counter stood a woman, busy arranging plates and stirring pots. Her hair was tied back in a neat braid, and she wore a simple apron over her uniform. She moved with quiet efficiency, a soft smile occasionally appearing as she interacted with customers. Jace stepped up to the counter. "I'll take whatever you recommend," he said, trying to keep his voice casual, though something about her presence made him pause. The woman looked up. Her eyes were calm, observing, yet there was a spark of curiosity behind them. "Something hearty?" she asked, her voice warm and steady. "That's the plan," Jace said with a grin. Myra nodded and went back to her work, humming softly under her breath. Within minutes, she placed a plate in front of him. The dish was simple: roasted vegetables, a protein he couldn't immediately identify, and a fragrant sauce, but it smelled incredible. He took a bite and froze. The flavors were perfectly balanced, comforting yet bold, familiar yet new. "This is amazing," he said, almost to himself. Myra smiled faintly. "Glad you like it. I try to make people feel at home, even if they're far from it." Jace raised an eyebrow. "You do this for a living?" "Among other things," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. She didn't elaborate, and Jace didn't press. Something about her made him respect her privacy. He ate quickly, savoring every bite, and before he left, he tossed a few credits onto the counter. "I'll be back," he said. "Looking forward to it," she said softly. Over the next few hours, Jace wandered the station, taking care of supplies and checking on his ship. Every now and then, he found himself returning to Myra's Kitchen, drawn by the food but more by the quiet warmth of the woman behind the counter. She was always busy, but she acknowledged him with a nod, and sometimes a brief conversation would spark between bites and orders. He watched her interact with others. She had a gentle way with people, calming an anxious trader whose shipment was delayed, offering a kind word to a lonely traveler, and sharing small smiles with children who wandered into her eatery. She did not boast, did not seek attention, yet her presence seemed to make everyone around her feel a little lighter. Jace began to realize he had underestimated her. At first, he thought she was just a cook, someone whose work he could admire but who had little else to offer. But the way she moved, The way she handled the chaos of the station suggested more. There was intelligence, resourcefulness, and a quiet strength there that he hadn't noticed at first glance. He decided to learn more. Not in an intrusive way, Jace was careful, observant, but by noticing, by listening, by asking small questions whenever he could. The station's night cycle approached, and the artificial lighting dimmed to a soft glow. Jace found himself at Myra's counter again. This time he stayed after the rush, watching her clean and organize. "Busy day?" he asked. "Every day is busy," she replied with a small smile, "but I like it that way." Jace nodded, intrigued. "I've been to a lot of stations, but not many kitchens feel alive. Yours does." Myra looked at him, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. "Alive," she repeated. "Yes, it's like everything you do has a purpose and you're not just making food, you're making people feel something." She paused, then returned to her work, but the small smile lingered. Jace realized that she was used to compliments, but she didn't seek them. She let her work speak for itself. As the station quieted and most of the travelers retired to their quarters or ships, Jace found a corner near the observation deck. He looked out at the stars, thinking about Myra. There was something different about her, something beyond her cooking, beyond the warmth she radiated. He felt curious in a way he hadn't felt in years. By the next day, he made a small routine of visiting the kitchen. Sometimes it was for meals, sometimes just to talk. He discovered she was clever, with quick wit and a mind that could untangle problems that left others scratching their heads. She had a calm confidence, a way of thinking that was methodical and empathetic at the same time. Yet she never spoke of her past, of why she was on this station, or what her dreams were. Jace did not press. He respected that. But the more he observed, the more he realized that she was not just a cook. She was someone extraordinary in ways that were subtle, hidden, and unassuming. That evening, as he left the station to check on the silver comet, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and admiration. Myra had left an impression on him, not just as a cook, but as a human being. There was curiosity, yes, but also a warmth he could not ignore. As the freighter moved slowly away from the station, Jace looked back at the glowing lights, and he thought, almost aloud, "There's more to her than anyone knows." And for the first time in a long time, Jace felt a stirring of something unfamiliar. Not the thrill of space travel, not the excitement of a freighter's next run, but a feeling deeper, quieter, and more human. Somewhere in the midst of commerce and chaos, Jace realized that this quiet woman, who seemed so ordinary at first, had already begun to change the way he saw the universe. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The space station was always alive with movement, but today it felt different to Jace. After spending a day observing Myra, he could no longer see her as just a cook. She had a calm confidence, a way of moving that made everything around her seem smoother, simpler, even when chaos swirled everywhere. Jace wandered through the concourse, taking in the usual sights: merchants haggling over exotic spices, robots delivering cargo, travelers from countless worlds hurrying to and fro. Yet, no matter where he went, his mind kept drifting back to Myra. He found himself wondering what she did when she wasn't cooking. Did she have adventures? Did she like this station, or was it just a stop on a longer journey? As he passed the market area, he noticed a small commotion. A vendor, an older human woman, was gesturing frantically at a malfunctioning cargo drone. The drone buzzed and spun in circles, its packages wobbling dangerously. Other merchants backed away, muttering complaints about delayed shipments. Jace instinctively stepped forward, but before he could intervene, Myra appeared. She had a small toolkit in her hands, moving calmly toward the drone. She didn't panic, didn't shout. She knelt beside it, inspecting the machinery, and with a few quick adjustments and careful manipulations, the drone whirred back to life, perfectly balanced once again. The vendor gasped. "How did you?" Myra smiled softly. It just needed a little patience and observation, she said, handing the drone back. Jace watched, his eyebrows raised. This was something he had not expected. He had assumed her talent lay only in cooking, in creating meals that could bring comfort to travelers. Yet here she was, handling technical problems with the same grace and focus she showed in the kitchen. "You seem to fix everything," Jace said when she noticed him leaning against a nearby railing. "I like solving problems," she replied, packing her tools away. "Not all problems are mechanical either. Some just need attention, patience, and a little creativity." Jace nodded slowly. "I never thought of it that way." From that moment, he began to see her differently. Myra wasn't just helpful or skilled. She was clever, perceptive, and quick to act when needed. And she had a calm confidence that inspired those around her to believe in themselves. Over the next few days, Jace made it a habit to observe Myra quietly, often joining her for meals or small conversations when the kitchen was less busy. He learned that she could converse fluently in several languages, even some alien dialects, which made her able to negotiate deals or explain rules to travelers who felt lost. She understood logistics better than anyone he had ever met on a station this size. One afternoon, the station's central power grid hiccuped. A group of engineers ran toward the control room, panicked at a sudden outage. Lights flickered, and the automated doors slowed. Merchants complained loudly about lost transactions. Travelers worried about whether their life support units in small docking pods would hold. Jace, standing at Myra's kitchen doorway, thought the situation would be out of control. But Myra remained calm. She walked toward the engineers, quietly asking questions and observing their actions. Within minutes, she suggested a temporary reroute of power through unused conduits, explaining it clearly and concisely. The engineers followed her instructions and the lights returned steadily, doors operated normally, and the station resumed its normal rhythm. The engineers nodded at her in disbelief. "Who are you?" one asked. Myra smiled softly. "Just someone who likes to help," she said. Jace could not stop himself from clapping softly, startling her. "You're amazing," he said. "You fix drones, power grids, and maybe even the world someday." She chuckled, shaking her head. "I only fix what I can," she replied. But Jace noticed a flicker of pride in her eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that she was more than what most people expected. Later, as the station quieted and the artificial lights dimmed to a soft amber, Jace and Myra found themselves on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, dotted with planets, nebulae, and distant ships moving slowly like glowing insects. "Do you ever get tired of space?" Jace asked. "Of traveling from station to station?" Myra shook her head. "No. There's always something new to learn, always someone new to meet. And even in places that feel chaotic, there's a rhythm, a pattern if you look closely." Jace smiled. "You see things differently than I do," she shrugged. "I just pay attention. Most people are too busy worrying about what might go wrong. I like to see what can go right." Jace thought about that. He had spent years running freighters, solving logistical problems and avoiding danger, but he had never met anyone who approached life like Myra. Her optimism, her cleverness, and her calm confidence fascinated him. "Do you ever miss a normal life?" he asked cautiously. Myra was quiet for a moment, gazing at the stars. "I had a life once," she said softly, "but I chose this. I chose freedom to explore, to help where I can. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." Jace felt a sudden respect for her that went beyond admiration for her skills. She had made choices that required courage and independence. He realized she wasn't just brilliant, she was brave in her own way, willing to walk paths most people would avoid. The next day brought another challenge, though it was not a dangerous one. A new shipment of rare supplies had arrived for the station, but the cargo was disorganized, mislabeled, and spread across multiple docking bays. The station's staff were frustrated, unsure how to sort it efficiently. Jace watched as Myra approached the chaos. She walked calmly among the piles of crates, taking notes on a small data pad. She assessed the situation, organized a plan, and delegated tasks to the station workers in a way that made sense to everyone. Within hours, the cargo was sorted, stored properly, and ready for distribution. Merchants came to thank her. Travelers complimented her efficiency. Even the station manager stopped by, shaking his head in awe. "I don't know how you did it," he said. Myra smiled quietly. "Sometimes it's just about seeing what others don't." Jace was again struck by her humility. She could have boasted, taken credit, or demanded recognition, but she didn't. She let her work speak for itself. That evening, Jace returned to her kitchen, sitting at his usual spot near the counter. He watched her prepare meals with the same calm precision he had seen in other areas. She sliced vegetables quickly but gently, stirred sauces with care, and arranged plates as if creating small works of art. "You're full of surprises," he said with a grin. Myra glanced at him, a small smile on her face. "I like to keep life interesting." "You've certainly done that," Jace said, feeling a warmth in his chest he couldn't explain. Days turned into a week, and Jace found himself looking forward to his visits more than he had expected. He learned small things about Myra. She loved observing alien cultures, she had a soft spot for children and animals, and she could remember details about people that others often forgot. But she never spoke much about her past, keeping a quiet mystery around her life before the station. One afternoon, as he helped her carry supplies for the kitchen, Jace decided to ask the question that had been on his mind for days. "Why here? Why this station? You could work anywhere, do anything, and yet you're here." Myra paused, resting a hand on a crate. She looked at him thoughtfully. "Somewhere along the way, I realized that helping people, seeing things work better, making small changes that matter, it feels more important than titles, more rewarding than recognition. I like being useful." Jace considered that. She wasn't seeking fame, fortune, or status. Her brilliance was genuine, humble, and focused on making life better for others. It was rare, and Jace admired it more than he could explain. "You make the station better," he said softly. "Not just with food or fixes, but with everything. People notice." Myra looked at him, eyes meeting his. "Maybe they do," she said quietly. "Or maybe I just hope they do." Jace felt something shift inside him. He realized he no longer saw her as a simple cook or even just as a clever problem solver. She was extraordinary in ways that were subtle, quiet, and deeply human. As he left the station that evening, he glanced back at her kitchen. Myra was busy at work, unaware of how profoundly she had affected someone's life. Jace smiled, feeling a strange mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something warmer he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in a long while, Jace felt that space travel wasn't the most exciting thing in his life. The real wonder, he realized, might be waiting in the form of a quiet, brilliant woman who could see what others overlooked. And he knew, without fully understanding why, that his life had just become infinitely more interesting. The space station thrummed with its usual energy, but today, a sense of tension floated in the air. Supplies had been delayed from the neighboring system, leaving some vendors short. The station's schedules were disrupted, and travelers muttered complaints as they waited for their shipments. Jace Mallory, leaning casually against the railing of the main concourse, noticed Myra moving calmly through the crowd. While everyone else rushed or argued, she walked steadily, assessing each situation with quiet precision. Her presence seemed to draw the tension out of people, a small ripple of calm in a sea of frustration. Jace followed her discreetly, curious to see what she would do. He had long since realized that Myra was more than a cook. She was clever, resourceful, and remarkably calm under pressure. But he was about to see just how far her abilities could reach. At the central docking bay, the source of the problem became clear. A shipment of medical supplies, fragile and critical for the station's needs, had arrived in multiple containers, but the labels were mismatched. Robots assigned to transport the crates were confused, and several workers argued over the correct orders. Without intervention, the delay could worsen, affecting travelers and merchants alike. "Looks like chaos," Jace muttered, shaking his head. Myra knelt beside the nearest crate, examining the labels and cross-referencing them with her small data pad. She didn't raise her voice, didn't scold the confused staff. She simply observed, thought, and then acted. "Move the smaller crates to Bay C," she instructed calmly. "Group the fragile packages together. The larger containers go to Bay B. The shipment that arrived first needs priority. Check the timestamps. I'll coordinate the robots to follow the new plan." Her instructions were clear, precise, and efficient. Jace watched as everyone complied, amazed at how naturally authority flowed from her, not from dominance, but from respect earned through competence and calm confidence. Within the hour, the shipment was organized perfectly, each crate in its rightful place, and the station hummed back to life. "Impressive," Jace said as he approached her. "You make this look easy." Myra smiled faintly. "It isn't hard when you take the time to think it through. Most people rush and panic, and that's when mistakes happen." "You're remarkable," Jace said, unable to stop himself. He felt a warmth in his chest, a combination of admiration and something more personal. Myra glanced at him, a soft smile on her face. "Thank you," she said simply, before moving on to assist a traveler who had lost their luggage in the chaos. Later, Jace accompanied Myra back to her kitchen. He helped her carry the crates that were now ready to be stored. "I don't think anyone else here could have done that," he said. "I've seen plenty of stations, and none of the staff handled it like you did." Myra shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "I like solving problems. It's just part of what I enjoy." "But this isn't just a problem," Jace pressed. "This is, you somehow making everyone around you work better. You calm them, guide them, and make them trust you. That's not just skill, it's something else." She paused, looking thoughtful. "I suppose it's just noticing what's needed and stepping in when I can. Sometimes people just need someone to organize the chaos." Jace leaned against the counter, watching her move with quiet efficiency. Every gesture, every decision, seemed deliberate yet effortless. It was mesmerizing. "You know," he said, "I used to think I was good at managing problems, but you see things differently. It's like you understand the whole station at once." Myra laughed softly, shaking her head. "I don't understand everything. I just notice patterns that others miss." Patterns. That word stuck with Jace. He realized Myra had a talent for seeing connections where others saw only confusion. Her mind worked like the stars themselves, complex, interconnected, and yet perfectly balanced. That evening, the station manager called a meeting. Several shipments from a neighboring colony had been delayed unexpectedly, affecting not just vendors but also research teams and medical facilities. Panic began to ripple through the station's staff. Jace found Myra near the observation deck, gazing at the stars. "Looks like another problem," he said with a grin. Myra turned to him. "It is, but it's manageable." "Manageable? This is huge. People are worried about shortages, equipment, and shipments." She nodded calmly. "Worrying doesn't solve anything. Planning and acting do." Together, they approached the manager and offered a plan. Myra outlined a step-by-step process: rerouting non-essential supplies, prioritizing critical shipments, reallocating robots to optimize transport, and coordinating staff shifts. The manager listened, skeptical at first, but soon realized Myra's suggestions were not only feasible, they were brilliant. By the end of the day, the station's workflow had returned to normal. Delays were minimized, confusion disappeared, and travelers and merchants alike were grateful for the smooth recovery. Jace couldn't help but notice the quiet way Myra accepted praise. She didn't boast. She didn't demand recognition. She simply acknowledged the thanks with a nod and returned to her work, as if the satisfaction of helping was enough. "You really are extraordinary," he whispered as they walked back to her kitchen. Myra glanced at him. "I just do what I can," she said, smiling. Over the next few days, Jace observed more of Myra's genius in action. She solved problems others didn't even notice, mediated disputes between merchants, and found creative ways to improve the station's efficiency. One morning, a group of travelers arrived with a damaged navigation module for their ship. The engineers on the station had given up, declaring it too complicated to repair. Jace watched Myra kneel beside the module, her fingers moving deftly as she examined circuits, recalibrated sensors, and adjusted the components. Hours later, the module worked perfectly. The travelers were ecstatic. "How do you do it?" Jace asked, fascinated. "Observation, patience, and logic," Myra replied. "And sometimes you need to think about how others would approach it. If you can anticipate their mistakes, you can prevent problems before they happen." Jace shook his head in awe. "You're like a genius but humble about it." Myra laughed softly. "I just like helping." And in that moment, Jace realized that her brilliance wasn't about showing off or achieving recognition. It was about making life better for those around her. That was a rare gift, one that he could not stop admiring. As the station's day ended, Jace and Myra found themselves on the observation deck again. The stars stretched endlessly before them, twinkling like diamonds in the infinite darkness. "You know," Jace said, leaning against the railing, "I've seen a lot of amazing people in my travels. Pilots, engineers, explorers, but you're different." "How so?" Myra asked, curious. "You make people better just by being here." "You fix things, yes, but you also inspire trust, calm, and hope. You make the station work and you make it better." Myra looked at him quietly, a soft blush coloring her cheeks. "That's kind of you to say," Jace smiled. "I mean it. You're not just a cook. You're extraordinary." For the first time, Myra paused, really looked at him, and allowed a small, sincere smile to form. "Thank you, Jace. That means a lot." And in that quiet moment, amid the stars and the hum of the station, something shifted between them. Admiration became affection, curiosity became warmth, and Jace realized that he was no longer seeing Myra as someone he simply respected. He was beginning to see her as someone he wanted to know more deeply, someone whose life he wanted to be part of. That evening, as Jace returned to his freighter, he glanced back at the station lights and saw Myra through her kitchen window, moving gracefully among pots and pans. Her presence had left an indelible mark on him. He thought about her calm confidence, her cleverness, and the quiet way she had turned the station's chaos into order. He knew, without fully understanding why, that Myra was unlike anyone he had ever met. And he felt a stirring in his heart, a quiet excitement, a sense that life had just become far more interesting than it had ever been. Somewhere among the stars, in a small kitchen on a bustling station, Myra had begun to change his world. And Jace knew that the adventures ahead would not just be about space, but about discovering the extraordinary person he had come to admire, and perhaps love. Little did he know, the real test of her genius and their bond was only just beginning. The station was quiet that evening, the hum of machinery softened by the dim glow of the observation deck lights. Jace found himself wandering there as he often did, watching the stars stretch endlessly into the black. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about shipments, routes, or freighter schedules. His thoughts, as usual, drifted to Myra. He saw her before she noticed him. She was leaning against the railing, staring out at the nebulae swirling in vibrant purples and blues, her braid falling over her shoulder. The soft glow of the lights illuminated her face, and for a moment Jace thought she looked like she belonged among the stars, as though she had been born to wander the universe. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly, approaching her. Myra didn't turn immediately, but her lips curved into a faint smile. "It is," she replied. "It never gets old. Every time I look, it feels like the first time." Jace leaned beside her, feeling the quiet hum of the station beneath them. "You've always seemed calm, in control. I mean, after everything you've done here, it amazes me how steady you are." Myra glanced at him, her gaze thoughtful. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly. "There was a time when I worried, when I tried too hard to control everything. But space, being out here among the stars, it teaches you patience. It teaches you what really matters." Jace turned to look at her, curious. "What matters to you?" Myra hesitated, then looked out at the stars again. "Freedom, curiosity, helping others, and finding places where I feel like I belong." Jace nodded slowly, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. "You make this station better," he said softly. "You've changed the way people work, how they think, how they trust each other. I've seen it firsthand." Myra's smile softened. "It's not just me. The station has so many people who care. I just notice things that others might overlook. I try to make small differences where I can." There was a silence between them, not awkward but comfortable. Jace realized he was learning something important. Myra's brilliance wasn't just about her skill or cleverness. It was about empathy, understanding, and seeing the human side of every problem. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Jace asked carefully. Myra looked down, tracing her fingers along the railing. "I did," she admitted softly. "I had a life on Earth once. A position in a major research institute, colleagues I respected, and a life that everyone expected me to follow. I was smart, ambitious, capable, but I felt trapped. I realized I was living someone else's idea of success, not my own." Jace listened intently, fascinated by the revelation. He had never known someone who could leave a life of prestige behind simply to follow curiosity and freedom. "So you came out here?" he asked. She nodded. "I wanted to see the universe, help where I could, and live a life I chose myself. It wasn't easy. There were sacrifices. But it was worth it." Jace felt a new wave of admiration for her. He had respected her cleverness, her calm under pressure, her ability to solve problems, but now he understood the courage behind it. Leaving everything familiar, stepping into the unknown, and building a new life on a station at the edge of human space, that took more than skill. That took heart. "You're incredible," he said, his voice quiet. "I mean, leaving everything behind to live your own life. I don't think I could do that." Myra laughed softly, a sound that was warm and unhurried. "Most people wouldn't. It's not for everyone, but I needed to, and I don't regret it." For a long moment they looked at each other, the hum of the station and the vastness of the stars surrounding them. Jace felt something shift inside him, a realization that Myra was no longer just someone he admired. She was someone he cared about deeply, someone whose courage and brilliance stirred feelings he couldn't ignore. "Jace," Myra said softly, breaking the silence, "why do you stay so interested in all of this?" She gestured toward the station, toward the cargo bays and the bustling corridors. "Most freighter pilots don't care about the station beyond their shipments." Jace shrugged. "I don't know, maybe because I see things differently now. Seeing how you handle everything, it changes my perspective. You make me want to pay attention, to notice the details, to care." Myra smiled, a warmth in her eyes that made Jace's chest tighten. "That's kind of you to say." They stood together in silence, looking at the stars, the vastness of space reflecting in their eyes. Jace felt a quiet certainty building inside him. He realized that he didn't want to leave this station, didn't want to return to the lonely routines of space travel without Myra by his side. Over the next few days, Jace's admiration deepened into something more personal. He began to notice small details. The way Myra laughed quietly when she was pleased, the way she moved with confidence and care, the subtle spark in her eyes when she solved a tricky problem. Every moment spent near her made his heart beat faster, and yet he didn't rush or pressure her. He simply observed, quietly cherishing their growing connection. One afternoon, a group of young travelers wandered into Myra's kitchen, curious about the smells and the work. Myra welcomed them warmly, showing them how she prepared meals, explaining simple cooking techniques, and even letting them try their hand at arranging plates. Jace watched from a corner, smiling. The children laughed and learned, and Myra's patience and kindness shone through. He realized that her genius wasn't just in fixing machines or organizing shipments. It was in nurturing, teaching, and inspiring those around her. "You really are remarkable," he said quietly when she noticed him. Myra smiled softly. "I just like helping people," she said, brushing flour from her apron. "But you do more than that," Jace said, stepping closer. "You inspire people, you make them better, and you make me better too." Myra looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "That's kind of you," she said, a faint blush on her cheeks. For the first time, Jace allowed himself to express the feelings that had been growing quietly for weeks. He realized that his admiration and respect had deepened into affection, something warm, personal, and undeniable. That evening, they met again on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly, and the station's lights glimmered softly below. "I've been thinking," Jace said, "about what you said, the life you left behind. I think I understand now why you're here. You weren't just running from something, you were running toward yourself." Myra nodded slowly. "Exactly. I wanted to find a life that was mine, not someone else's version of success." Jace looked at her, feeling the weight of his own emotions. "And I think I want to be part of that life, if you'll have me. Not to interfere, not to complicate, but to be with you, to explore, to see what's out there together." Myra's eyes softened, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then she reached out, placing her hand gently on his. "Jace, I think I've felt that too, though I didn't know it at first. You see me, not just the work I do, but me, and that matters." Jace's heart soared. "Then does that mean—" Myra smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that made his chest feel light. "Yes," she said softly, "it does." In that moment, under the vast expanse of stars, they both realized that their bond was more than admiration or curiosity. It was connection, understanding, and the start of something deeply human, warm, and extraordinary. The days that followed were filled with small, shared moments. Jace helped Myra with deliveries, carried supplies, and listened as she spoke of her dreams, her thoughts, and the places she wanted to see. Myra, in turn, shared more of her clever solutions, her ideas for improving life on the station, and her quiet reflections on humanity's potential. Together, they discovered a rhythm, a partnership built not just on affection, but on mutual respect, trust, and shared curiosity. Jace had once thought that adventure lay in distant stars, in freighter runs and uncharted systems. Now he realized that true adventure could also be found in human connection, in learning from and with someone extraordinary. One evening, as the station's lights dimmed and the observation deck glowed softly, Jace watched Myra prepare a simple meal. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think that the stars were the most incredible thing out there, but now I think it's people, like you." Myra glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "That's very kind of you," she said softly. "No," Jace replied firmly. "It's true. You make me see things differently. You make me want to be better. And I care about you more than I expected." For the first time, Myra allowed herself to fully meet his gaze, a mixture of warmth and understanding passing between them. "I care about you too," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, beneath the infinite stars and the soft hum of the station, they realized that their journey together had only just begun, not among problems or shipments, but in the shared discovery of hearts, trust, and human connection. For Jace, the stars would always be beautiful, but Myra made them meaningful. And for Myra, life on the station had gained new color, warmth, and depth, because for the first time, someone truly saw her. Together, they faced the future with curiosity, hope, and a quiet joy that no chaos, no problem, and no distance could diminish. The station was alive with light and sound as Jace walked through the main concourse, Myra beside him. Weeks had passed since their quiet evening on the observation deck, and in that time their bond had grown steadily, quietly, and meaningfully. They worked together on shipments, solved logistical problems, and shared laughter over simple meals in Myra's kitchen. Yet today felt different. A sense of anticipation hung in the air. The station manager had arranged a gathering to recognize the clever and efficient ways Myra had improved the station's operations. Word had spread quickly among the vendors and travelers. This was no ordinary celebration, but a moment to honor someone whose work had touched everyone on the station. Jace felt a mixture of pride and admiration as he walked beside Myra. "You don't usually like attention," he said quietly. Myra smiled faintly. "I don't," she admitted, "but I suppose it's nice to be appreciated once in a while." As they entered the central hall, the room erupted in applause. Vendors, station staff, and travelers alike cheered and clapped for Myra. Jace felt a warm pride swell in his chest, not just for her achievements, but for the grace with which she accepted the recognition. She bowed slightly, acknowledging the crowd without a word of boastfulness. The station manager stepped forward, holding a small plaque. "For your incredible contributions, your insight, and your tireless dedication, we honor Myra. You have not only improved operations but inspired everyone around you." Myra's eyes widened slightly. She accepted the plaque with quiet dignity, looking around at the people who had benefited from her work. "Thank you," she said softly. "I only did what I could, and I hope it helped." The applause grew louder, but Myra remained humble. Jace could not help but notice the quiet strength in her, her ability to shine without needing the spotlight, to influence without demanding recognition. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed, leaving Jace and Myra in the soft glow of the station lights. He took her hand gently. "You've changed everything here," he said. "And not just the station, people's lives, their confidence, their happiness. You've made a difference." Myra looked at him, her eyes reflecting both pride and modesty. "I only did what I love," she replied softly. "But it's extraordinary," Jace said firmly. "You're extraordinary." She smiled, reaching up to squeeze his hand. "You make me feel seen, Jace," she said quietly. "Not just for what I do, but for who I am." That simple acknowledgement stirred something deep within him. For so long, Jace had wandered the stars, admired by others for his skill as a pilot but rarely understood. Myra saw him, not the freighter, not the work, but him. And he felt a connection stronger than any he had experienced before. The next day, Jace returned to the Silver Comet to check preparations for his next journey. Myra accompanied him, carrying a small bag of supplies for the trip. She had insisted on joining him, not for adventure alone, but to be part of his life, to see what lay beyond the station together. As they prepared for departure, the station hummed with activity. Robots rolled past with crates, travelers bid farewells, and merchants shouted last-minute orders. But Jace and Myra stood together, a quiet island of calm amid the bustle. "You ready?" Jace asked, checking the freighter's systems. Myra nodded, a confident smile on her face. "I am. Let's see what's out there." He offered his hand and she took it. In that simple gesture, they shared more than affection. They shared trust, partnership, and a commitment to face whatever the universe held together. The freighter lifted off smoothly, leaving the station behind. Through the cockpit window, the lights of the hub shrank into the distance, and the stars stretched endlessly before them. Jace piloted the ship with ease, but his mind was not on the routes or cargo. It was on Myra, sitting beside him, quietly observing, her curiosity and energy filling the cabin with warmth. "You know," he said softly, "I've seen a lot of space, planets, stars, stations, but this feels different." Myra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Different how?" "Because I'm not just traveling," Jace said. "I'm with you, and that makes everything more alive." Myra smiled, a soft blush warming her cheeks. "I feel the same," she said. "I've explored a lot of space, but I've never felt like this, not with anyone." Jace reached over and took her hand again. Then let's make this journey together, not just for the roots or the freighter, but for us." She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, together." Days passed as they traveled to new systems. The freighter hummed steadily, carrying supplies to distant colonies. Myra quickly adapted to life aboard the ship. She helped organize storage, advised on logistics, and even experimented with creating meals from limited supplies, turning simple ingredients into culinary delights. Jace watched her, continually amazed. Her intelligence and creativity had no bounds. But more than that, he noticed her compassion, her patience, and her joy in helping others. Even in the confines of a small ship, she found ways to make life better for everyone on board. One evening, as they floated in zero gravity near the observation deck, Myra pointed out a distant planet glowing faintly in the starlight. "Look at that," she whispered. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Jace smiled, reaching out to touch her hand. "Not as beautiful as you," he said softly, and she laughed quietly, the sound filling the small space. "It's wonderful being here with you," she admitted. "I've always explored the stars, but I've never had someone to share it with, not like this." Jace felt a swell of warmth. "I know exactly what you mean. Space is incredible, but it's better when it's shared, especially with someone like you." They floated together in silence for a while, looking at the stars and feeling the quiet joy of companionship. It was a moment free from schedules, shipments, and responsibilities, a moment just for them, and it felt timeless. Weeks passed, and the freighter made deliveries to several small colonies. Everywhere they went, Myra's brilliance and kindness left an impression. Colonists admired her clever problem-solving. Travelers appreciated her warmth and hospitality, and Jace watched with quiet pride as she quietly became a hero in her own way. Through it all, their relationship deepened. They laughed together, worked together, and shared quiet moments beneath the stars. Each challenge, each discovery, each interaction reminded Jace why he cared so deeply for Myra. One day, as they prepared to dock at a particularly small and remote station, Jace turned to her. "You know," he said, "we've traveled a lot of space together now, seen planets, moons, stations, but I think the best part has been this. You, us." Myra looked at him, her eyes soft and shining. "I feel the same. I never thought I'd find someone who understands me, who sees me." "But you do." Jace took a deep breath. "Then let's not just explore space. Let's explore life together. Wherever it leads, whatever comes next, we face it together." Myra nodded, her hand finding his. "I can't think of anything better." As the freighter settled into orbit above the remote station, Jace and Myra looked out at the alien world below. Mountains rose in jagged peaks, rivers glimmered in the sunlight, and distant forests stretched endlessly. "Imagine what we could learn here," Myra said, excitement in her voice. "The people, the land, the culture, everything is new." Jace smiled, feeling a rush of joy and anticipation. "And we'll do it together, every discovery, every adventure, side by side." In that moment, the freighter was no longer just a ship, and the stars were no longer just distant lights. They were a canvas for their shared journey, a backdrop for a story of courage, curiosity, and love. Myra turned to him, her expression soft. "Jace, thank you for seeing me, for sharing this journey." He took both her hands in his. "Thank you for letting me in, for being yourself, for making life extraordinary." And together they looked out at the stars, ready to face whatever the universe had in store, not as a pilot and a cook, not as individuals, but as partners, explorers, and companions on the greatest adventure of all, life itself. Somewhere among the distant planets, the endless lights of space seemed to shine brighter, not because of the stars themselves, but because of the human connection that now guided them forward. And for Jace and Myra, the journey was just beginning.